Good morning. How is everybody today? I'm sure we all had amazing lavender-scented sleep last night. So thank you for the warm introduction, Amanda. I'm really excited to be here with you today. And as Amanda said, what an amazing environment to have these conversations in, right? We're surrounded by the beauty of nature, but here we are talking about technologies like artificial intelligence, digital spaces, and how to interact with people all over the world on a one-to-one basis. It's really just quite fascinating. And I want to kick off by talking about technology and the role of technology in people's lives, everyday users, the people that you interact with, people you build products for. So this is a result of a Google Ipsos survey that actually said that 58% of smartphone users feel more favorable towards companies that are building personalized material. So they actually like it when they get things that are relevant to them. And it seems like in a lot of the conversation around AI and the impact of AI, we forget that really we're making things for individuals. And actually it is generally what people want. They want ads that are relevant to them. They want to be shown products that will make their lives better, more interesting, et cetera. But also, 63% of smartphone users are more likely to purchase from companies whose mobile stores and apps do relevant communications. And maybe to this audience, this is all pretty obvious information, but I do want to frame, as we talk about the concept of responsible AI, I like to start by saying the purpose of my job is not to tell you that AI is bad or that AI shouldn't be built or AI is evil. It actually is to say that I wouldn't be doing this job. I would not do what I do today if I didn't genuinely think that this technology could be harnessed to do good and great things. And even if it means something like giving customers products and recommendations that are suited to their needs. But the reality is, after this e-commerce adoption, we're only really seeing a 20% of purchases happen online. Why is that? Well, one is that people are concerned about the trustworthiness of these technologies. And trustworthiness is a really interesting term, right? Because we live in a world of numbers and metrics and conversion rates and click-through rates. My first job as a data scientist actually was working for a company that did targeted advertising. And interestingly enough, one of my first jobs was creating one of the first hyper-targeting models in industry. So I, in some sense, actually understand a lot of the work you do. But what's interesting is seeing how that conversion works. And now what I'm seeing is it's this lack of trust in AI systems. But again, trust is such an abstract concept. What makes us trust something or someone or a company or a product? And the answer really is reliability. It's knowing that when I go and open this app, it will act the way I want it to act, that I actually don't actually have to think about it. I don't have to worry about what the output will be or how it will impact my children or whether I'm getting addicted, and that I trust then the company and the product is being built for me and not just for pure revenue generation. So I entered this world of artificial intelligence and responsible AI specifically in 2017. And what's been really fascinating to me, now that we live in this rebirth of AI, essentially due to generative AI and large language models, we've actually come full circle. So the first question when I entered this field in 2017, people were asking, is AI alive? And I would sit on all of these panels, and we'd have all these conversations about paperclip maximizers and Terminator and HAL. And I'd sit there and say, well, I work for Accenture, and that's where I worked for at the time. My job is not to sit on philosophical panels. I actually have to build things that people want. If anybody here has ever worked in consulting or worked with a consulting firm, they give you a ton of resources and a number to meet, and they say good luck, and they throw you out upon the world. So while it was nice to sit on panels and learn and have really great conversations about different types of ethical standards and what deontological ethics means, that actually didn't matter to my customers at all. Then, interestingly, the conversation shifted to whether or not something will be replaced by AI, which is kind of the world we're entering in right now. Will you have a job? Will I have a job? Will factory workers have a job? Interestingly, it's come full circle as well, but in a slightly different way. The conversations we had in 2017 and 2018 were whether or not blue-collar jobs would be replaced. Lots of concerns about factory workers and HVAC individuals and your lawn mechanic and the person who takes care of your car. And the funny thing is, in 2023, the conversation is actually about programmers and white-collar jobs and legal professionals. So that's actually a fascinating change. But there was a lot of conversation about whether or not some field would be replaced by artificial intelligence. Again, none of that happened. So the next one, the font is so tiny, and I'm trying to read it. The next one, which is where folks like myself came in, was actually a good understanding that this technology was not some abstract concept that existed outside of human society or markets or the products we're building. But actually, a lot of the issues that arose in artificial intelligence, again, this customer unreliability, was actually just a reflection of societal biases that already existed. I'll give you a very specific example. Banking was one of the first industries that were trying to adopt machine learning and AI in order to do, for example, do risk prediction. Well, turns out that people are not always very nice to other people. And in Chicago, there was a history of something called redlining, where banks would decide to literally not give loans or be more harsh or punitive on their assessments of African-American potential lenders, and they would discriminate against them. That history lives in the data. So literally, there were red lines drawn around different districts around Chicago. And shockingly, surprise, when you try to build risk prediction models on that historical data, it would overwhelmingly say that these districts are high risk. Not because these individuals were actually truly high risk, but because they were discriminated against. And unless you knew the context and the history of redlining, you wouldn't know that that was a discriminatory outcome. So Riva Schwartz, who's leading a lot of this work at NIST, if you're familiar with the National Institutes for Standards and Technology, they've been thinking a lot about algorithmic bias. So they have an amazing risk management framework that is really applicable to businesses, and I try to talk about it whenever I give a talk, because they've really dived into what it means to build products and think about this kind of algorithmic risk. She says something like, we coat what we're building in data to give it an idea of objectivity. And I love that image of coding it in data, because at the core of it is still what it fundamentally is, human interactions, like how people interact with each other, how products are being used. But if we wrap a layer of data around it, we like to think that we've abstracted away from the problems that exist, and simply we don't. And then we entered this next world, and this is the world that I am very happy in, with this idea that we can start to measure these harms, biases, et cetera, in order to create products that are actually good for everybody, beneficial for everybody. And again, banks building models of risk prediction on discriminatory data is not just harmful to the African-American communities, obviously is directly harmful to them, but also it's not smart for banks to do that. Here they are missing out on an entire market of revenue because they don't understand that their data has bias. So these were not situations where you're fighting against what it means to build a bottom line. Actually, it is your bottom line. Building inclusive products are about understanding the data, understanding your market and your customers. None of this is new. None of this is introduced by artificial intelligence. AI, again, gives that coding of data that makes it seem more objective. Then we enter the world of developing risk methodologies, right? So a lot of us, myself included, started to work a lot more on concepts of algorithmic auditing, but not just technical auditing. How do we build in socio-technical auditing, understanding society, people, and building that into the products that we do? And then we started building out a regulatory ecosystem. So we're developing risk methods, and now we're working across an ecosystem, which is honestly a really brilliant place to be. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about research that I've done specifically on why an ecosystem is really helpful here. So there you are trying to build some sort of trust and safety mechanism for your products, trying to understand your customers and how that translates to the potential risk that can be introduced. Well, it's really helpful if, for example, you have guidelines from the US government or NIST, as I mentioned earlier, or you have nonprofits like mine, for example, that are trying to do this work to highlight and showcase the kind of work and the kind of sentiments that people have about this technology. And then we came back to, November of 2022, and suddenly generative AI came on the scene, and it seemed like someone just hit a hard reset button. And every conversation I had suddenly rewound. Like if this were a movie, we'd have that sort of squeaky movie rewind moment, and I'd be back in 2017 again, and I'd be sitting on a panel with a bunch of philosophers saying, is AI alive? And I'm going to be the one sitting there saying it is the same thing all over again. So yes, we are in a new, super exciting era of artificial intelligence. That is undeniable. The impact of transformer technologies has completely changed how we can interact with AI systems. The other thing is the big revolution has been in the accessibility of these models, the ability to build them in no-code fashion, the fact that open source is exploding, but also the whole purpose of this timeline is to show we are just going to cycle through the same questions all over again. So AI is not alive. Every job will not be replaced by AI. Let's move past that now and go to the part where we're actually thinking about smart product development. So what's new? As I mentioned, generative AI has revolutionized the accessibility of these systems. There are a lot of really smart design decisions that have gone into building these LLM chatbots, right? So ChatGPT is GPT 3.5/GPT-4, which means that there was a GPT and GPT-2 and GPT-3. So why was the original transformer-based chatbot, why was that not the big moment? Well, in order to interact with that technology, you had to be able to code in Python. You have to understand how transformer-based models work, and you'd have to build your little back end and connect it to a front end and do all that yourself. And then OpenAI came in and said, you know what, we'll just build a front end for you. And now it looks like any sort of messaging SMS app, which was a brilliant decision, because now I can sit literally at my hairdresser's and we're talking and she says something like, I really got to update my Instagram and post more pictures and do more content, and I just don't have the time to sit there and write the stuff I'm supposed to write. And I'm like, have you seen this ChatGPT thing? And I open it for her and she's like, oh, this is really great. Hey, can this help me create a website? I'm like, it'll make your website in like 10 minutes and it'll write all your copy for you. And that accessibility, the fact that in a casual conversation with my hairdresser, I can explain to her in 15 minutes how to use this app. She downloads it immediately and is playing with it as I'm paying and walking out the door. That has been the real revolution. So yes, LLMs, super fascinating, really interesting work going on. A lot of the stuff that I love to do is in the realm of reinforcement learning with human feedback and a lot of the safety mechanisms. But let's not forget the true revolution has been anybody can interact with this technology. And this builds on this increasing no-code revolution. So when I say anybody can interact, now anybody can develop something on top of these very sophisticated technologies. So the world we're entering in has these two layers. There's this one layer of companies building these foundation models, right? So they're going to spend all the money on the super expensive data collection, training, et cetera, and people can just build plugins on top of it. So as you're building on this baseline technology, what that means is the startup world is going to explode. So people have been talking about how there's this revival of startup culture. Absolutely, because now you don't have to gather data and hire a bunch of super expensive engineers and go train your own homegrown models, and frankly also be responsible for the upkeep of these models. I think a lot of folks who get excited about technology and hop in don't realize that maintaining these models is sometimes more expensive over time than just building them, and that maintenance is tough. So the fact that another company is going to handle all that for you, and your responsibility is to build a plugin and fine-tune it for your use case, actually enables this huge explosion of startups and other capabilities and people entering this market who maybe couldn't have previously. So what's old? So as I said, if this were a movie, we would do the rewind thing and the squeaky noise, and we'd go back to 2017, because I'm having some of the same conversations all over again. Does anybody here remember Microsoft Tay chatbot, right? And that was 2017. Well, guess what? OpenAI's impressive new chatbot isn't immune to racism. That's that first headline. Lensa, which is an image generation AI, is carrying gender bias into the future. So the Lensa one was super fascinating. A friend of mine, Melissa Hakula, is at MIT Technology Review, and she has very Asian looks, and she tried to use Lensa. She has a whole article about this. You should read it. It's really, really great. So she does this thing where she tries to make profile pictures in Lensa. Remember there was that moment where everybody was using Lensa, and all the guys were super excited because it made them look like really cool warriors, and all the girls got to look like super sexy, whatever, fairies. So that's what it would do. No, it's 100% true. Read Melissa's article. It's great, because it's great, well, this can be my LinkedIn profile picture. Absolutely not. Because as somebody who looked Asian, it increasingly made her more sexualized and more nude, even though none of her photos showed a lot of skin. And Melissa actually dresses quite conservatively. And it was very shocking to her. And the reason for that is these models are trained off of the data that is available on the internet. So it's actually a misconception that it's built on, quote, the world's data. It's actually untrue. It's built on Reddit. It's built on Common Crawl, right? Everyone starts laughing when I say it is built on Reddit, 100%. So what are the images of Asian women that are on Reddit? I'm just gonna stop talking right there. So it takes a picture of this woman who is very conservatively dressed, looks Asian, and she wants to make a profile picture, and it automatically gears towards what it has learned, which is this is how Asian women should be portrayed. And again, a lot of the men, their images made them look stronger, gave them like those really great cheekbones that we all would love to have, but actually only exist in our lens of profile pictures. And more recently, there was an example of, more explicitly, a young woman who was trying to make a profile picture for herself to put on her LinkedIn profile. And it was her literally in an MIT sweatshirt. She's an MIT undergrad. She was Asian, had short, dark hair, and it actually just made her a white woman. That's all it did. It just made her white. And it said, well, this is she actually asked it for a professional photo. Make this photo professional, thinking that it was gonna get rid of her sweatshirt, maybe put her in a button down. No, it actually literally just made her white. So the reinforcement bias of what exists online, what these images are, and how that's being built into the technology is problematic, because again, we're coding it in this veneer of objectivity because we've slapped a bunch of data on top of things. So we have to look at the fundamental data underneath, which is not actually representative of society. So I worked at Twitter. I led the machine learning ethics team. And while it seemed like Twitter really, quote, captured the world, only 3% of the world's population was on Twitter. 97% of the world's population is not on Twitter. And yet it seems like, and it is actually true, that social media platforms like Twitter determine the course of democracy. It is such a bold statement to say, but it is actually true. The fate of elections in especially Western democracies, are decided on social media platforms. Knowing that, and especially Twitter, which was one of the most politically active social media platforms, 3% of the world's population was on there. So whose voices are in there? What are they saying? And how is that data, again, being increasingly used downstream to build things that seem like they're, quote, reflective of the world, when in reality, they're actually reflective of a very few narrow perspectives. So what's changed? We're no longer in the early days of artificial intelligence. So what's great is we have teams capable of at-scale deployment, because again, this is not just about the technology, it's about the access to the technology. And importantly, we're smarter about the impacts of AI systems. What's really, really amazing is I worked with a lot of reporters from 2017 onwards, and I'm so proud that a lot of them are in these amazing roles. Karen Howe at MIT Technology Review, Kari Johnson at Wired, just to name two, Hayden Field at NBCU, and all these people are really smart about technology. I can 100% tell you everything they write is so well informed. And that's great, because that means we have a public that is increasingly well-informed. So we're not in this 2017 world of, well, what is AI? Oh my goodness, I'm so scared. We're actually in a world of people being increasingly smarter about algorithmic bias, about data privacy, data security, and wanting to take action, and frankly, rewarding companies that take action to protect them. So what are the challenges? First is navigating these unknown unknowns. So whenever I have a client at Accenture, or even today, or people I work with that say, we want to talk about algorithmic ethics and algorithmic bias, it seems like this insurmountable challenge, right? Where, well, I have to think of everything, every bad thing that could possibly happen. And it's very difficult to, frankly, it's not an easy task, but folks like myself and other people who've worked in this field actually know how to narrow it down into the things that are relevant for your use cases. And now the concept of KYC, know your customer, is about responsible and ethical data use. Because again, it's not just that people want this stuff or punish companies that don't have it. They actually reward companies. They give more business to companies that are responsibly using their data and being more transparent. And it's interesting because we've seen Meta, aka Facebook, make a complete 180 about their transparency. It's fascinating to see them entering the open source market and being more transparent. So if you haven't seen, I suggest going to transparency.facebook.com, transparency.fb.com. They have an entire transparency center where they actually talk through how their algorithms work in plain speak. So I know the team that did that, and they spent months. I mean, it is not easy to explain how algorithms work in an understandable way to everyday people. And for them in particular, a lot of social media influencers are interested in this. People who have children entering the online arena are interested in this. And again, they're actually seeing rewards and more people interested in their platform, which had been not doing as great compared to other platforms. And they've seen more people coming back. And again, it's also about having this genuine voice. So people are also worried about this idea of hidden AI systems that are making decisions that impact their lives, and they can't do anything about it. Everything from hiring to loan risk assessment, as I had mentioned, car insurance rates, et cetera. People are increasingly aware that companies are buying data. They have sort of vague notion of this market of data, and their data is being sold, and they can't control it, and they just really want to have some sort of ownership. So I had alluded to this work I had done a few years ago. You can find sort of there's an academic paper on Archive, there's a longer form article on Sloan Management Review. So this was, a few years ago, but it still holds today. And it's about putting responsible AI into practice. So that one says it's a 7-minute read. I will save you the 7 minutes and sort of talk through, like, what's the takeaway, right? Like, how do we make this TikTok sized, right? So first is tone from the top. How do you build a responsible AI practice in your company is, first of all, just having clear guidance from leadership. And this can mean building ethical principles. This can mean actually bringing in an ethics officer. This can mean whatever you want it to mean, but clearly articulating from the top that this is a priority in your company, in your organization. This is what you want to be building and doing. And then the rest are actually about putting your money where your mouth is. So second is measuring success. And this actually, to me, as a quantitative social scientist, is one of the most important parts, if not the most important part. We work towards what we can measure, right? Like, as human beings, we're kind of simple creatures. We want to run however many miles. We want to lose however many pounds. We like numbers, and we like working towards them. So when you are creating your performance indicators for teams, how are you building in responsible and ethical use? And I'll give you very specific examples. Often it's the most junior data scientist that has to go munge data, like clean data and do stuff with it. They're actually most likely the people to identify, hey, there could be some data set imbalance, something wrong here. They're also the least empowered to make a significant product decision. So how do you incentivize all of these people who are touching the data and the models, who are the most likely to find problems, but also the least able to make major product decisions, to be empowered to raise their hands and say, hey, so I think we should take a beat and figure out if this data is actually going to help our customers and not be penalized for it. Because frankly, I've run product teams as well. Product teams are incentivized by delivering and delivering on time or faster than on time. So how can you build in performance indicators for people that actually encourage responsible use, encourage that moment to actually review what they're doing and think about it, and also incentivizing your models. Models have an optimization function. Usually that optimization function is something called accuracy, quote accuracy, which is, as a statistician, it's like one of many statistical numbers you can use. It just got the best name, so everybody really latched onto it. But an R-squared is actually a very simple metric that's not actually indicative of what people think it is. So how can you measure your models, your model output in different ways so that it's actually giving you the feedback you want and you're able to track and trace this? I mentioned the ecosystem and the value of internal and external pressure. It helped me a lot internally at companies if I could say, hey, this was guidelines that were built by some respected authority, right? So for example, the White House Office of Science, Technology, and Policy actually have an AI Bill of Rights. Well, isn't it great then, right? So you could say, hey, this is literally articulated by the White House. This is how we should be building our AI systems. It helps be an internal advocate to say, here are external smart voices that are actually aligning with what I'm saying. And then finally, building these teams so it's proximity to product and proximity to leadership. How do you create that feedback loop between product, leadership, and ensuring that you are mentioning to the company and to your customers that this is how we're building and building responsibly. So what can be done today? That's kind of the important takeaway, right? So if I want to go start doing this right now, One is culture is critical. So I had mentioned earlier about this open source community. People are actually kind of scared of open source. And as somebody who actually built my career programming in R, so before I learned Python, I learned the R programming language. R has one of the best open source communities out there. There's actually some really beautiful online spaces, and to be a little bit philosophical, even though I was complaining about philosophers in the beginning, you kind of have to trust that human beings are capable of instituting cultures that reinforce our values. We can't just jump to making laws and making punishments. Laws don't work unless we've decided we want to adhere to them. It's actually the truth. Laws work because we are in a law-abiding society. And it's very fascinating. When we look at the open source world, what is the world that has been created absent these laws? And what you'll find is that they actually do have strict culture, norms, and things people do in order to create a safe and comfortable space for a lot of people. So culture is critical. Second is using existing channels of communication for open feedback. So providing ways for people to raise questions anonymously and protected. So you might have an ombudsperson office where people can raise these questions or talk about issues that may be coming up in the products that they're building. And also communication channels with customers, employees, vendors. So the big thing I'm entering into is this world of red teaming, or actually structured public feedback. How do I do public feedback, not just as surveys, but actually as targeted product decision making? And it's fun. I'm running out of time, but really quickly, if you want to look up the DEF CON Generative Red Team Challenge, I was part of designing the largest ever red team exercise. We had 2,200 people come in. We had 8 major large language models, so every large language model company was part of this. And our next step is we're taking this data and we're collaboratively working with the companies to write a transparency report that comes out in February. And it was just such a moment in collaborative designing to solve a problem. And it was a wonderful and optimistic way to think about how we can build technology. And last and most importantly, being authentic. I think one thing I will say in my years of working in this field is genuinely being an authentic voice and being honest about what you can and can't do or what you are and aren't doing is really what people respond to the best. So to come full circle myself, artificial intelligence, yes, we are in an amazing, amazing new era. We're almost rebooting many different things that we thought about, but the core fundamentals stay the same. It's about a product, it's about people, and it's about the connections. Thank you so much for your time.